Bismillah, alhamdulillah. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So we are still discussing, I think it's hadith number 230 in Sahih Muslim. And this is the hadith that relates to the last three verses of Surah Al-Baqarah. We've been discussing this hadith now for 2 times. And there's still lots to be said about it that the scholars of hadith have explained and commented on. One of the verses says, رَبَّنَا لَا تُؤَخِذْنَا إِن نَسِينَا أَوْ أَخْطَأْنَا. O Allah, do not hold us accountable if we forget or make a mistake. Now, scholars say that forgetting could be of 2 kinds. There is forgetfulness that can happen unintentionally because this is our physical ability. We forget things. You may memorize something and forget it just because your memory is not that strong. Or maybe you got distracted and you forgot something, one of the obligations that you're supposed to do. This kind of forgetfulness we are not held accountable for. Sometimes you think you prayed Dhuhr or prayed Asr and you got so busy with work and then you realize that you didn't. And then once you remember, you perform the salah. This forgetfulness we are not held accountable for. The other kind of forgetfulness is related to neglect. Somebody just doesn't care that much, so is not keen about performing the prayer or giving out the zakah on time, or performing obligations of the Sharia in general. So because he doesn't care that much, things tend to slip away from him. This is forgetfulness based on neglect or caused by neglect. This is the kind of forgetfulness that a person will be held accountable for. Just like also when we sleep, sometimes you're so tired that you do not wake up for Fajr, for the morning Salah. It can happen to anybody, but it would happen here and there sporadically for any one of us if they got so tired at work or slept very late. But for this to become a pattern, then it's a sign of neglect. He doesn't even care to set the alarm. Then that is a kind of neglect that he will be held accountable for. But to sleep and not wake up for a prayer here or there uncontrollably, because beyond your capacity, you're not held accountable for that. So in this verse, scholars say that when we ask Allah, رَبَّنَا لَا تُؤَخِذْنَا إِن نَسِينَا, O Allah, do not hold us accountable if we forget, we're asking about the second kind of forgetfulness, because all of us can also sometimes neglect some of the obligations of Sharia, and it leads us to miss certain things. And this is a mistake. This is a sin and a mistake. This is khata that we ask Allah for forgiveness for. And so رَبَّنَا لَا تُؤَخِذْنَا إِن نَسِينَا أَوْ أَخْطَأْنَا. Also khata here, khata means to make a mistake. And again, there's unintentional mistake and there's intentional mistake. Scholars say that we are asking Allah to forgive our intentional mistakes because the unintentional ones, Allah has already forgiven us and does not hold us accountable for that. This is not how I used to understand the verses, but this is what I read in the commentary here. Imam Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, he might be the most famous scholar of tafsir, of explanation of the Quran. He says, نسينا ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا شيئا فرضت علينا عمله فلم نعمله أو أخطأنا في فعل شيء نهيتنا عن فعله. He says نسينا relates to neglecting obligations. أخطأنا relates to falling into prohibitions. This or that can happen unintentionally or intentionally. If it's unintentional, then it is forgiven by the mercy of Allah, and it doesn't really require asking for more forgiveness because Allah out of His mercy has granted that to us. We ask Allah to forgive us for the mistakes that we perform intentionally by falling into prohibitions, or the forgetfulness and neglect that we do intentionally based on carelessness. And it goes on. And they say that the kind of forgetfulness that leads to failure to perform obligations, this is the same kind of forgetfulness Allah talked about Adam alayhi salam. وَلَقَدْ عَهِدْنَا إِلَىٰ آدَمَ مِنْ قَبْلُ فَنَسِيَ وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا. He says, I had taken the covenant on Adam. I made injunctions upon him not to eat from that tree. فَنَسِيَ, he forgot. وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا. But was it considered as a sin? Yes, he said he forgot. So this forgetfulness mentioned here is the intentional forgetfulness that we are held responsible for, that it comes out of neglect, okay, out of forgetting that this is a prohibition, or just not taking care of it, or not putting it in our vision and mind. And this is the same kind of forgetfulness. When it becomes so strong, the person not only will forget a commandment here or there, the person may forget the whole deen. If he becomes so neglectful that he doesn't care about the deen at all, he may even leave the deen totally. And this is mentioned in the verse, فَالْيَوْمَ نَنْسَاهُمْ كَمَا نَسُوا لِقَاءَ يَوْمِهِمْ هَذَا. The forgetfulness will extend not only to commandments, but even to beliefs. He will forget those beliefs because he doesn't work on reinforcing them and reminding himself of them. He starts forgetting the belief in the qadr becomes weak, the belief in the akhirah, the hereafter becomes weak, the belief in Allah becomes weak. Allah says, today we will neglect them just like they forgot or neglected. They basically forgot or were absent-minded the يوم القيامة لقاء يومهم هذا, the day that they were going to meet Allah Azza wa Jal, they forgot about it, and that's out of neglect. Allah says, I will neglect them. I will neglect them because of that. Allah used nansahum. He says, I will forget them, but Allah doesn't forget. So we have to understand it in the manner that befits Allah. Allah says, they did nisyan, they forgot, and I will forget them. This is muqabala. It's called muqabala. They actually forgot out of neglect. Allah says, I will leave them. That's basically what it means. And nisyan could also mean tark. I will leave them just like they forgot. And then the same about al-khata as well. It is mentioned that Mu'adh ibn Jabal, when he used to recite Surah Al-Baqarah and come to these verses that have the dua, the supplication at the end, he would conclude Surah Al-Baqarah with saying Ameen, just like he would conclude Al-Fatiha by saying Ameen. So if you hear somebody doing that, this is not wrong. I mention that because one time in Egypt, we were praying Taraweeh behind an Imam. He's considered a scholar in Egypt, and people were saying Ameen as he was concluding Surah Al-Baqarah. So after the Salah, he actually told them, no, you should stay silent, you shouldn't say Ameen. But actually they did not do wrong, and what they did, I just came across the fact that Mu'adh ibn Jabal used to do that. Nah. And in Salat al-Nafila, in the optional prayer, we are allowed to say things in the midst of the recitation, different from Salat al-Farida. In the Fard, you're supposed to stick to the Quran. When you're praying, you don't interrupt the recitation by saying any other words. But in the optional prayer, you're allowed. You come across something that is a supplication, you can say Ameen, or Allahumma inni as'aluka min fadlik. You can say a whole sentence. Say, Allah, I ask you your favor. Oh Allah, have mercy on me. And you come across the mentioning of the Prophet ﷺ, you can say Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Okay? And that's actually the sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ. لا يمر بآية عذاب إلا استعاذ الله ولا يمر بآية رحمة إلا سأل الله. Whenever a verse talks about the fire of hell, he would ask Allah for protection. A verse that talks about Jannah, he would ask Allah for his mercy, and so on. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. We'll just complete the verses, and then there's more to be said. We'll leave it some other time. How many minutes? I think maybe we've gone too much. How many minutes? I'll just check the timing here. 9 minutes. Maybe give me 2 more minutes. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا. إصر means a heavy kind of تكليف. تترجمه ازاي؟ تكليف يعني ثقيل. Obligation. Burden, like a burden. Obligation or burden. Oh Allah, do not put a burden on us Isr actually comes from an obligation or a covenant, or such as Allah says, وَأَخَذْتُمْ عَلَى ذَلِكُمْ إِصْرِي. You've given the pledge. It's something that is binding. So do not bind us with obligation, hard obligations, difficult obligations like the ones you placed on the people before us. We mentioned some examples for you, and that some nations before us who out of their disobedience to Allah, Allah makes things even harder for them. فَبِظُلْمٍ مِّنَ الَّذِينَ هَادُوا حَرَّمْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ طَيِّبَاتٍ أُحِلَّتْ لَهُم. Because of injustice and wrongdoing from the Israelites, حَرَّمْنَا, I made prohibited on them طَيِّبَاتٍ, lawful things, good things that were previously lawful to them. So this is what we are asking Allah. Also, for instance, it is mentioned that if some kind of defilement, najasa, came on their clothing, it wasn't cleansed by water like we do. They would have to actually tear that part out of their clothing and then sew it again. It was made difficult on them in that way. And then, رَبَّنَا وَلَا تُحَمِّلْنَا مَا لَا طَاقَةَ لَنَا بِهِ. Oh Allah, do not place any burden on us that is beyond our capacity. And this could be an obligation. But the first one is an obligation. The second one could be even a decree from Allah. So we ask Allah not to put us through trials that we cannot tolerate or are not able to deal with, something beyond our capacity. And we are weak, and it's good always to ask Allah not to burden us with any kind of trial in our life that we cannot bear. Even some of the people who commented on this verse, they said, for someone to have an intense sexual desire that he has difficulty controlling, that is also falls under this. He's asking Allah not to put him through this kind of test where he is liable to sin because he cannot control his desire. أبو الدرداء كان يقول في دعائه وأعوذ بك من غلمة ليس لها عدة. غلمة means sexual desire. He says, oh Allah, I ask refuge with you from an intense sexual desire that I'm not prepared for. I don't have the strength of Iman to overcome. Now, وَاعْفُ عَنَّا وَاغْفِرْ لَنَا وَارْحَمْنَا. وَاعْفُ عَنَّا وَاغْفِرْ لَنَا وَارْحَمْنَا. You may think those mean the same thing, but scholars have differed on the meaning of أَعْفُ عَنَّا وَاغْفِرْ لَنَا. Some scholars say أَعْفُ عَنَّا means to not to punish for the sin. اغفر لنا means to conceal and not to expose the person for their sins, as if the first one is talking about relieving the person and protecting the person from the physical punishment, while the second one talks about relieving the person from the moral punishment and the spiritual kind of punishment. As some of them said, afu anna relates to, for instance, kaba'ir, other one relates to sagha'ir, major sins and minor sins. Warhamna, basically the person is asking Allah Azza wa Jal to bestow His mercy upon him. So basically all three are needed to ward off the punishment and to conceal the person and protect him for any other evil consequences associated with the sin, and also to return with mercy on the person, because the sins can also block the mercy of Allah from reaching the person. And then if somebody achieves that, then he comes closer to Allah. Anta Mawlana. Al-Mawla means the close friend, right? The beloved friend. If somebody is relieved of the burden of sin and Allah bestows their mercy upon them, then Allah becomes close to the person. Anta Mawlana. And if that happens, فَانْصُرْنَا عَلَى الْقَوْمِ الْكَافِرِينَ, then the victory over our enemies becomes close. So the victory is close. When Allah says, أَلَا إِنَّ نَصْرَ اللَّهِ قَرِيبٌ, victory is close, but we are the ones who push ourselves away from the victory. Allah showed us the path to the victory. It's right there. But we just don't want to extend our hand to reach it, because that requires some kind of effort. And that is the problem. The victory is there. The steps to gain to that victory starts with fulfilling the obligations of Allah, getting rid of the burden of sin, being close friends of Allah Azza wa Jal, then Allah's support will come to us, and then victory will come. We'll stop here.
The Prophet ﷺ used to do this every
night, every single night.
So if we think about it, we're very smart. Because you think, forgive us for forgot, akhta, afwan, every single day. It's like giving muhasabah.